Let me start by saying what a thrill it is to finally meet you.
Thank you.
I wish that we could do it face to face, obviously.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
And I've decided the beanie's off. The beanie's off. I need to get the
All
beanie
right.
off.
I like the real you.
This year has been so challenging for the human spirit, for what it is to be human. And everyone I know, including myself, has kind of, I think, struggled with this idea of stillness here while chaos ensues out there. And for someone who absorbs and translates and transcribes the human condition so beautifully, I wonder kind of how you have adapted just to get the ball rolling at home in the last 8 months.
All right, let's start with an easy one. I'm like everybody else, man. I'm like everybody else. I've been taking it a day at a time. And that's all you can do, really. You know, I haven't had any particular secret as how to deal with the whole thing. You know, we just, you know, Patty and I, we literally just been taking it a day at a time, doing what we can. You know, we were lucky in that we made our record and shot the film of it a few months before the virus hit. So I had something to do,
yeah.
And I could do it with a relatively small group of people, you know. So that helped a lot. So I've been able to stay busy, which has helped. But it's just been a day at a time, like everybody else. I don't have any great wisdom as to how to get through whatever this is that we've been going through, you know.
What a gift this album is. I'm so grateful, and I think everyone will be very grateful to receive this album this year. You know, when I think about it, when I listened to it for the first time, I was immediately transported to a place that I know and love that I wanted to hear again, which is this idea of you and the band coming together and just getting out of your own way and just allowing that chemistry and what is special about you as a band and as friends come to be.
It was a great project for us because I don't think we've ever played live together in the studio and then kept everything that we did on the full take, all the singing, all the playing. It's the E Street Band, really completely live, and I overdubbed a few solos and things. But it's really the band in one shot. So we've played live in the studio before, but never kept everything. Always gone back in and overdubbed a vocal or overdubbed, you know, put other things on. So it was it was a great experience for the guys, and it was a testament to how good the band has gotten and how better it continues to get over the years, both in the studio and out, you know. So it was a lot of fun, and of course seeing the guys is always great, and it was just a great experience for everybody that was involved, you know.
Why do you think it's taken you this long to get to that point in your process, to get with the band in the room and feel like you can capture that live recording and it's good enough for us to hear?
I don't know. You know, you get involved with all different kinds of projects that happen in a lot of different kinds of ways. For quite a while, I simply began to demo all my music because I got tired of going into the studio and writing 30 songs and having, you know, 5 of them be okay. And so I started to demo everything. But once I started to demo everything, I realized I really got locked into those demos. And so then I was kind of working in either the records became sort of solo records or different types of projects. And so this was the first thing when I came up with a group of songs relatively very quickly, and I said, well, smart thing to do is to not demo them and let the band come in and just wash straight into them, you know. And I also knew I wanted to do a band project. It had been really quite a while since we'd done, since I'd really put the band together and let them play in the studio. And so it's all just timing and what happens and where you are in different places in your life, and everything comes along in its time. So it was just a good moment for it.
Is it a gut feeling? Do you sit there when you're listening to these songs and go, I need to hear the band fire these up. I need to hear what they can do around these? Or is it like, to some degree, it's time for us to get together, because if I don't, then the nature of this relationship may start to change if I don't continue to keep the wheel turning?
There is some of that. You know, you do need to, you've got to touch base creatively every so often just to keep everything alive and humming and the relationships up and good. And so there is some of that going. And it's also, like I say, what happens with the nature of the material and the project you're doing. You know, this material, the songs came very quickly in about 7 to 10 days. We made the record in 4 days, and on the 5th day we kind of listened to everything, and it was just. But everything has to be nurtured, and even though the E Street Band's been together for a long time, it's still the same. You know, you got to get back together. You've got to nurture those relationships, and you've got to play together. Yeah, and you've got to, you know, the playing together ultimately is what we're there for, and what, you know, it's the foundation of who we are together. And so you've got to touch base with that every so
I mean, it's really
often.
clear when you listen to this album, or any of the music that you've made with the E Street Band, or any of the shows that you've played live, countless shows with the band, that the musical shorthand you have is second to none. That there's an unspoken communication that exists between you musically through the spirit of how you play. But that's only one side of the work. There also, and I am obsessed with your dynamic with the E Street Band, because the joy it's given me as a fan, and the fact that it comes and goes in these stages, and most people hold on to things and they never let it go. And you have the courage to let it go so it comes home. So I wonder, when it comes home, whether or not there has to be moments where things are addressed on a normal communication level, like, man, I wish I'd played on that record, or, you know what I mean? And you have to face those things down, because these are real human beings and they love to play with you.
Well, I always know the guys like to work, so that's sort of unspoken. But they also know I do work on my own and on certain projects, and it's just the natural ebb and flow of our lives together.
Did it take a while to establish that ebb and flow, though? I mean, like, going back, and not only to go back briefly at this point in context of the question, but that decision after one of your most successful records and your first taste of success with the band, where everybody just wanted that, back in Born to Run, to have the bravery to turn around and say, look, I need to flow, the ebb will come later. You know, did it take a while for the band to understand? Because I would imagine the normal human reaction would have been, this is working, why can't we just keep going?
Well, in truth, if I had had some very creative ideas that involved continuing sort of working with the band as I had been doing, I would have done something. But I got to a place where it was really after Born in the USA, where we had our greatest success. And the first thing I did, well, I don't want to chase that horse, you know. The guys you see that end up trying to, okay, the next record's got to be bigger, or it's not the healthiest way to go. You know, you're better off following your muse. And immediately after Born in the USA, I wanted to make a smaller record. I made it over the top of my garage, me and one other guy. And I played all the instruments myself, and it was a record called Tunnel of Love. And so I immediately wanted to introduce myself as a singer and a songwriter, and I wasn't interested in sort of bettering, you know, what we'd done with Born in the USA or anything else. It's a losing game whenever you get into that particular approach. So after that, the band took quite a long break, 10 years. We really didn't play together for 10 years. And I was just I had my family and raising my children when they were very young, and, you know, trying some other things, and just looking around to see who I was going to be, you know, after we had that big success. And so, but then the relationships proved themselves both creatively and emotionally by just, you know, there came a point in time where I said, well, I miss the guys. Let's see if the guys miss me. And we eventually started to work together again. And it's been the best last 20 years, which is what it's been now. It's been 20 years since the band really got back together, have been the greatest of our performing and lives, you know. So it's been a blessing.
I mean, this album is a triumph, you know, and as I said before, and I hope you take this as a compliment, I am such a fan of everything that you've gone on throughout your life and applied yourself to creatively, and the way that you've balanced what we love about you and what we insatiably want from you versus what you're willing to give, which is, when I show up, I'm committed. When I'm not, I'm out the picture. Understand that. And you've mastered that, I think. But this album feels like all of that restlessness that has been wrapped up in your journey has just come home, for a brief moment, has just come home to this thing that people know and love so well. And I wonder if you loved that once you gave into that and knew it was going to feel like something we love and feel familiar, whether you loved it, given that your history suggests that you reject elements of that.
Well, yeah, you go through different phases, and you know, I went through long periods of phase where I just, whatever it was I just did, I don't want to sound like that. But we kind of came to a place where I said, well, gee, this is material that I want to sound like the E Street Band, what you know, or my idea of it. You know, I wanted the pianos, and we've got our little glockenspiels in there.
And even structurally, like the big pauses where it stops and you think it's going to end. And in my mind, when you finally get to play live, it's just going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, back in. You know what I mean? You just know it's going to come back.
This is great material to play live, so it's very painful to not be able to go out and play right now, because this is material that'll play incredible on stage. And so I was really just all in on wanting the record to I wanted to go back to a style, probably closest you'd have to go back to maybe Born to Run, you know, where I gave Roy free rein on the piano, and the arrangements the songs fit those kinds of arrangements. And so it was a lovely modern revisitation of that style, you know.
Yeah, big, just big and heartfelt and spiritually alive, and words are beautiful, and, you know, reference points to things that we've heard you pull from before, from, you know, your palette, your mood board of images and characters, and it all just really ties together into what I think is one big story. And one of the things that I wondered before we moved into the album specific is, in pulling the E Street Band back together, and to some degree getting back to that space of what you sound like, or what you sounded like when you instinctively began. It's the natural place that you fit into, right? This is what we really sound like at the heart of it before we decide to change or move.
Right.
Whether playing together over those 4 days to some degree allowed you to begin to cross a bridge together and fill in the spaces emotionally that had been hard to address, because 2 of your brothers, 3 friends, and I'm sure maybe others, but in particular 2 of your brothers from the E Street Band aren't playing on this particular record, and whether or not you acknowledge that this was an important part of that process.
Well, you know, you still experience the loss of Clarence and Danny. You know, that's just, like I say, they're members in absentia. They'll never not be members of the band, and so it's always corny to say, but they are always there in spirit, and you know, they revisit your process in their own mysterious ways that those of our friends who've passed stay with us and do. And the record has got quite a bit to do with, you know, there's part of its subtext is there's some aging and loss of people as time goes by, and that's a part of what the record is, and then at the same time, you know, you're sort of celebrating the fact that the band goes on and we carry their spirits with us. And the impetus for a lot of the material was the loss of my good friend George Thies, who was him and I were the last members of my very first band. So when he passed away, it left me as the only remaining living member of the first band that I had, which was a very strange and thought, and it gave rise to most of the material that's on Letter to You. You know, it's sort of a reflection and a meditation on time passing and loss of friends, and how that affects you as you grow older.
And it begins with a song called 1 Minute You're Here, which is just a beautiful opening to the album. And also in terms of arrangement and musicality, is so lovingly nurtured by the band as you're finding this thought. It's almost like you're being surrounded by them in this moment, and they're just there with you whilst you're capturing this thought and sharing it. The idea of mortality is not really something that rock and roll was built to address. Rock and roll is to be timeless and to run and chase and experience and stare down and fight and love and all of those things. And yet you've made this stirring rock and roll record that addresses these ideas. And I wonder sort of how it felt as these songs were pouring out of you and you were getting out of the way of them, because it doesn't sound like there was a lot of over-analysis going on here, that it was really coming from the heart.
Yeah, I mean, the songs were written very quickly, so I didn't spend a lot of time on them. They were all written, each one was written in, a day or two, and they came quite naturally. So that's always nice when that happens. 1 Minute You're Here it's a little bit of a preface to the record. It's unusual to start a record with its quietest song. And but it felt like, okay, the record really starts with Letter to You, but there's this little preface that lets you know what the record is going to encompass, the emotional field that it's going to deal in. And the record starts with 1 Minute You're Here, and then ends with I'll See You in My Dreams, which are both songs about mortality and death. It was just sort of a little tip of the hat to where the record was going to go, and a little slightly connected to Western Stars. So it was a little transitional piece of music.
At what point in your life, as you were going from family to album to tour, and those are kind of the 3 points, right? That if you could look at it in terms of as a shape that define the musical life. At what point did you realize that life is actually short? Life
is short but long, So obviously, the older you get, the shorter it seems, So, I feel, hey, I'm just in the middle of it, I'm feeling good, and the band is ripping, and we're going through this crazy time period, but we're keeping our spirit, and given the circumstances of the day, we're getting along, So that triumvirate of family work dynamic is always the trickiest thing to suss out. It took me a long time for me to get that straight, and that's even with my family are mixed directly in with the band, as Patty's a band member, If you can balance those two things, it leads for a pretty satisfying life, and I've been lucky enough to sort that through as I've gotten older.
I think it's inspiring to see how you've been able to build such a strong, what seems at least for me as a fan, as someone who observes and isn't part of the dynamic, such a strong balance over time between the two, because so much of your music, and I think music steeped in great rock and roll, is built on the chase. I think of a song like Last Man Standing, and I think about that idea, and maybe I'm missing the nuance of the song, but the title itself says to me, like, I'm running things down, It's almost like I'm afraid of what I'm not going to experience when it's all said and done.
I think that that record that particular song was directly due to George's passing and me finding out that, well, okay, I'm out of that group of people, I'm kind of here on my own, And it was a small honoring of the guys that I learned my craft with, between the ages of 14 and 17 or 18. Those were some of the deepest learning years of my life. Learning how to be on stage, learning how to write, learning how to front the band, learning how to sing in front of a band, learning how to put together a show, learning how to play for all different kinds of audiences at firemen's fairs, at union halls, at CYO dances, and just really honing your craft, So it was the tip of the hat, sort of that period of learning with that group of people, And we always wanted to make music that followed our lives along. I said I didn't want to find myself as 40 years old on stage, sort of feeling funny about singing a song that I wrote when I was 20, where I was trying to hold on to some ephemeral sense of youth. I always wanted to write music that felt like it
was life being lived. at the time.
Yeah, exactly. That's been a concern of mine.
In fact, I was talking to Rick Rubin about this the other day. We were discussing Tom Petty's album, Wildflowers, because it's coming out in its sort of original 25-song format that I think Tom always wanted to put it out in. Not the 15 single album, although I laughed at it. It's like, that's the single album. 15 songs nowadays is a marathon for kids, but anyway.
It is. I mean, back in the day, you didn't have room for more than 10 or 12 songs. You know, if you were my early records have 7 songs on them, 8 songs on them. You know, that was all you could fit. You had 40 minutes. You know, so
that were 9-minute songs, though, Bruce. To be fair, no, I'm just
that's true. You know,
no, we were talking about this, and I was saying that album is so remarkable in many respects because it does what you just said. It tells the story of a man at 44 who's going through it and wanted to make a timeless document of that moment rather than try to chase something down. And I feel like the last 5 or maybe 6 years of your life, you have achieved something incredible. You have found a way, it's a magic act, really. You found a way to reflect generously and tell your life story through the written word, through Broadway, and now through this gift of an album, and not sound like you're closing your life story. It sounds like you're making room for something else.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to put it, because really it's kind of packing your bags from a certain period of time in your life, putting them away, and then giving yourself room to do whatever you're going to do next, you know. It was all those projects were summational. The book was, the play was. This record is sort of, it's a combination of summational and the beginning of something new, you know, with the band. But yeah, that's how I feel. I mean, I feel like...
like the book was the garage sale, Broadway was the reckoning, and the album is the gift.
Maybe that's it.
What did you learn from the Broadway experience? I want to talk a little bit about that specific because it was something that was so unique. I don't live with many regrets, Bruce. I've got the tools to get past those, but that one is really on the line for me, never getting a chance to see the show. But I've watched it on TV. And it struck me that every night you were going through this process again for fans in the audience. And maybe I'm looking too deeply into this, but I've watched, just to make it personal for a sec, I've watched my mum, who is currently suffering from, a disease based in age and memory loss. And I'm watching her making memories, like trying to store memories. So as they start to go away, she keeps the important ones. And I know that that's something that's close to your family as well. And I wonder in some respects whether there's something subliminal going on where you're like, I just got to make sure these are in order. These make sense before I can move on to the next thing.
Well, the Broadway show was, a lot of these projects amazingly happened by accident, you know, like the book came out of us playing at the Super Bowl, believe it or not, back in 2008, where I wrote a small essay for online about that experience. And so I said, I found a voice that I enjoyed writing in, and so I ended up writing the book. The Broadway play came out of, we were invited to play at the White House by President Obama in the last 2 weeks that he was in the White House. So I said, well, I don't want to bring the whole band down there. I'll go down and play a few acoustic songs myself. And maybe just to change it up, I'll read a little from the book and I'll play a song. So I came in the studio and I spent a couple hours for 2 days and I put together 90% of what was the Broadway show. And I went down and I played it in the East Room in the White House. And after it, the president came on stage and he said, you know, that was really good. That should be a show. You know, this is true. He said that ought to be a show that you can play for other people, you know. And so on the way back, I said, yeah, I think that's right. That should be something that I should be able to take out and play for some folks. And so I said, well, I need a really intimate environment because I only played for 200 people at the White House, like no more than 1,000 seats, 900 seats, and all those beautiful theaters were on Broadway. So that's where we ended up. And but the whole thing, once again, came about very organically. And then it was just, I followed the tract of the book, which follows basically the development of my creative and recorded life. And so that it was a very natural structure. And once again, I said it ended up being sort of a summational performance, but that was one of the greatest experiences of my life. You know, the 100 and I'm not sure how many shows I did, 126 or something, were some of the loveliest nights of my life. Every night was challenging. Every night was a blessing. The audiences were absolutely incredible, and just one of the loveliest experiences I ever had.
On this album, there is a real sense of freedom that I think came from the speed at which you seem to write these songs. And I know that the instrument that you wrote them on drew you to it. I'm obsessed with this part of making music, that instruments speak to their players, that it's not just a tool, that it's a relationship. And it sounds like you built a very strong and quick relationship with this guitar that was gifted to you, right, by a fan.
It's a funny story. I was coming out of the Broadway show, and, you know, there's a little stretch where the fans are there, and I sign a few things, and I, you know, say hello, and I hear a few stories. And as a kid, right before I got in the car, and he's standing there with his guitar, and he was from, I think he was from Italy, you know, and he said, you know, Bruce, this is we brought this for you, and he had the guitar. There was no case or anything, and he told me literally it was a minute, you know, and he gave me the guitar, and I said thank you, and I got in the car with it, and I said, gee, this is a really beautifully made guitar, and it was, and it was from it's a Claves or something, was a company I'd never heard before, but the wood was gorgeous, and so I brought it home and I put it in my living room. I set it up in my living room, and it just sat there, and I didn't play it. And right around the time I started to feel something coming with the songs, I picked it up, and then most of the songs came out of it. You know, it was just like, it was a beautiful guitar to play, beautiful sounding guitar, and the songs came pouring out of it. So it was a lovely sort of little piece of magic that I have no idea who the kid was or where he is now, but I have to send him some thanks. So.
How do you know? I've got to go back. There's a moment that I need to just kind of take you back to in that answer where you sort of threw it away, but to me it was really important, which is I kind of felt the song starting to come, and I know that I spent too long asking questions to musicians to know that analysis is like dancing for architecture. But I do have to ask you, like, if you could put it into words, how do you know that something is just circling you that needs to be captured or connected to?
Closest thing I can connect it to, it's like, you know, there's this long intubation period. There's like a garden, you know, you seed it with experience and time, and then you wait, all right? And you don't know how long you're going to have to wait. Unfortunately, creativity does not work as like the seasons do. You know, if I knew I was going to get a batch of songs every winter, I'd be a lot happier, or every summer. But you seed it, and then eventually something, there's an incident or an event or something in life just sort of sets it off, and they come. And when you're lucky, as I was on this project, they come all at once. They come fast. The recordings come fast. Fast is good. But that exact moment is a moment that I've never known or read anyone who's been able to describe it. What happens between that moment of when things are ready to sprout and then when they're there. That's the moment that can't be described. That's why it's magic, you know.
Is it spiritual?
Yeah, I would say that it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And it's that moment before you take something that is just in the air and suddenly you make it physical. It's a song. It turns into a piece of recording. You know, that exact moment is quite indescribable, you know. But when it happens, it's funny because it's such a wonderful thing, you know. I wish everyone could experience it, you know. I mean, the week that I spent writing the record was so easy. And I hadn't written a song for the E Street Band in probably 6 or 7 years. So the week that I spent writing that music, when it was just kind of coming every day, this one song, Letter to You, See You in My Dreams, Ghosts, just every day something else came. What a lovely experience that is. It's one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. And then when the band came in and just fell into that music, and we spent only 3 hours a song, and I could get in the booth, come around to the front of the recording, and hear the record finished in front of me. It was just wonderful. Yeah, just an incredible experiences that still remain some of the loveliest of my life when they happen.
Do you sleep better when that's happening, or are you too excited and you sleep worse?
Yeah, I keep the guitar in the bedroom because you will wake up at night and continue working on something you had going. And so you tend to, your whole metabolism speeds up.
Yeah.
So for a week, you're very active and your system is very on high.
I want to get back to that relationship with instruments. I'm fascinated by the idea that Fender that you played on Born to Run, that famous cover, it had to be that guitar. That perhaps you had a relationship with the guitar that you made Nebraska on, because it sounds to me like you did. That's one of the most intimate records I've ever heard in my life. And that idea of instruments and you having these moments in time, did it have to be that guitar for Born to Run to get made? Do you look back on it now? If it had been a different instrument, it would have been a different record?
Well, your instruments blend in with the records that you made. So that guitar, which is, that's like my arm. I put that on. I don't even feel like I have an instrument on. It feels just like a piece of me. And Born to Run was funny because I actually wrote a lot of it on piano, which is why if you go to Born to Run, there's all those piano intros. I had a little Aeolian spinet piano in my little tiny shotgun house, and I went in and that's how the beginning of Jungle Land and Backstreets and all, that's how the record became piano-centric. A lot of it was written on the piano. And then I played on that Fender guitar, and the guitar I from Nebraska, which is, wait a minute, can somebody get me? I'll get it. Hold on. There it is. This is the guitar this is the guitar Nebraska came out of.
Wow.
Can you see it?
Oh my gosh.
I was standing in her front lawn, just twirling her baton. Me and her waiting for her answer. Some people died. That was it. So it came out of this. So, and all the songs came out of this guitar. So those are, they become sacred pieces for you. Anything that brought you all that music. So I've got a few instruments that are sacred to me. I wish I still had that Aeolian piano that I wrote Born to Run on. I don't know what I did with it. I gave it away to somebody when I was moving because I couldn't carry it. So.
Well, that's all part of the story too. It's all part of the story too. Let me ask you: Have you written any other notable moments or anything on that guitar since Nebraska, or is that kind of hold its place now for you?
No, you use it, and then you don't go back to those instruments for some reason. They did their job. Wow. I leave them semi-retired. I may play it on something that I'm recording in the studio, but no, I haven't gone back.
But you did go back on this album, and you found 3 songs that appear on
right.
And they're amazing songs, and they fit beautifully in the context of this album because, as you said, you've created a modern, a version of what the E Street Band sounds like. But my question is, on a song like Janey Needs a Shooter, how do you even find that? And what prompts you to go back so far to find something you feel is going to fit into this narrative? That would suggest that you archive in your head like no one I've ever met in my life.
It was funny, because we were working on a lot of stuff that I have in the vault to put out at some time. And I went through a whole almost record of pre-Greetings from Asbury Park music that was all acoustic. And these songs were inside them. And I said, wow, these were good songs that I, at one point or another, sometimes tried to arrange with the band. I said, it'd be fun to hear the band on this one, that one, and this one. And I just picked them by random, and the guys came in and I said, okay, today we're going to record songs that are 50 years old. And we're going to see what happens, So we went in and they came out great. The modern band playing those ideas that I had as a 22-year-old, right? Talk about I was 22 when I wrote all those songs, and it was great. And for some reason, it just fit on the record. And because the record is, it skips through time, and it starts with me thinking about when I was 14 and 15, and then just slow and moves into the present, So those songs added a little touchstone for that certain period of time, but a lot of fun, and the band played them great, and I went back and I sort of found a voice that really fit them, and they're a nice addition to the record.
I mean, the voice that you found on this record, there are moments that I feel you found a tone and an emotion and a feeling to go along with these songs that I've heard very rarely, if ever, from you. A chance for you to kind of, I suppose, put yourself inside the song in a different way. I feel sometimes, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel sometimes musicians bend the song to their own tone or their own talent. And I feel like you go the other way. You find a place where you know what the song needs and you're willing to go there. Like on a song like House of a Thousand Guitars. Your voice on that is unbelievable.
Thank you. Yeah, you got to meet the song halfway, Every piece of music has its demands. I just try to find out what that is, what tone in my voice is going to feel right for this particular piece of music, and you try to meet it in the middle. And that's one of my favorite songs on the record. I'm not exactly sure why yet.
Oh, I am, because it's stealth, the whole point. That song, It feels to me like it's the whole point of it all. It's the whole show in one song.
It is. That's well put, because that's exactly what it is. It's at the center of the record, and it sort of speaks to this world that the band and I have attempted to create with its values, its ideas, its codes since we started. And it kind of collects all of that into one piece of music, into this imaginary House of a Thousand Guitars.
It's not imaginary. You're sitting in it right now. I can see the guitars behind you.
This is the House of a Thousand Guitars, that's for sure.
I mean, is it in the set now? And I don't want to obviously box you into something that you will immediately rip up and do whatever you want on the night, but I don't see how there isn't a moment where House of a Thousand Guitars doesn't close the show.
It could, yeah. It's one of those. It'll come in there somewhere. It is lovely and semational and speaks to that world that I've created with my fans and with my band. So that's a really little blessed piece of music for me.
I would say it should have ended the album as a fan, but it shouldn't have, because I'll See You in My Dreams is just the perfect way for the album to end. And you've spoken honestly and openly about the way that you relate to your dreams. And it's weird, I have friends who very, very rarely recall their dreams. I don't often recall my dreams, but you seem to be able to. And I wonder kind of without getting too personal, since you've gone through this process of recollecting and sharing, whether or not your dreams have been different lately.
I remember a lot of my dreams, and I always have. I'm a vivid dreamer, and I've always remembered, when I wake in the morning, I will very often remember extensively what I dreamt the night before. But that song was basically about those that pass away don't ever really leave us. They visit me, and they do visit me in my dreams several times a year. I'll see, Clarence will come up a couple of times in a year. Or my you know, the fellow that traveled with me on the road for 25 years, I'll see him or I'll see Danny. They just show up in very absurd, sometimes in abstract ways, you know, in the middle of strange stories. But they're there, and it's actually a lovely thing to revisit with them in that way. So the song was a little concrete in the fact that does happen to me. But it's also about how they walk alongside of us forever. You know, the people that we love don't ever truly leave us. The pain slips away, the love remains. And they live in that love and walk alongside you as your ancestors and your life companions, as a part of your spirit, you know. So that song is basically about that. Hey, you know, I'm not going to see you at the next session, but I'll see you in my dreams.
Have you ever gotten songs from dreams? Has anything come to you in a dream that's made it into a Bruce Springsteen record?
Only once. Only once did I ever dream. Usually what happens is you dream a song you're writing and you think it's fantastic. And you wake up and it's always not. You know, there's something in the dream that feels great while you're doing, but when you wake up, it's just like, oh, this isn't that much. The only song I ever got out of a dream is a song, and nobody's really gonna know what it is. A song called Surprise, Surprise from my Working on a Dream record. For some reason, I dreamt that song, woke up, wrote it, came out pretty good. But that's the only song I've ever grabbed out of a dream that ended up being anything. So. And
it's funny because in preparation for this conversation, I went on the most beautiful deep dive. I just started somewhere, I don't even know where, and I just ended up going very deep into footages and randomly. And I found these old performance videos of you playing with the band in the early days, just the most glorious chaos. Just women running on stage and grabbing you and kissing you, and the band, it's just unbelievable.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. Those were the days. And I think about all that old footage, and I wonder whether or not you ever come across it. Even just by accident, you stumble on something and you just allow yourself just to indulge a little bit in it and reflect a little bit through what has been captured on video.
Yeah, that was fun. That was, you know, we didn't allow ourselves to be shot very often when we were young. I was superstitious about it, as far as the magician not wanting to see too closely how he does his magic trick. And so I'm so glad for the footage that exists now as I've gotten older. And I really wish I'd allowed, and we film a lot now, but I really wish I'd allowed us to film much more when I was younger. But that particular piece of footage, which I'm very familiar with, was us playing Rosalita in Phoenix, Arizona.
That's right.
And I think I was 27 or 28, and it was just this. It was the end of the night, and there was just that fabulous, chaotic moment where the stage is besieged, and it's a great little piece of rock and roll footage, you know, rock and roll film.
There's a moment after they finally remove the women from the stage and everything else, where I think you turn around to someone in the band, and you're just like, what the just happened?
Yeah.
And the veneer just falls away, and all of a sudden you're not the boss anymore. You're just this 27-year-old normal kid who's like, what just happened then? It was amazing.
Yeah. Great time. Great night. We had a lot of great shows in Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona was a big, big city for us when we very started, and great audiences there. So that was a lovely moment.
One thing I've learned from talking to musicians over what has now become a majority of my life is that this beautiful experience that you go through and that we all go through together by loving what you do, I would say almost inevitably begins with the desire to get past something, fill some hole.
Oh, of course, yeah.
To resolve issues, a fracture in your life, motivation, something as simple as I'll show you.
Well, you're a repairman, and first thing you're trying to do is repair yourself. You know, the places that you've been wounded or hurt or feel empty, and then through doing that, you come up with a gift where you can help people repair themselves through your music and through. So that's the way I look at part of my job is I'm a repairman. You know, it's also you're into an identity search. Who am I? What do I believe in? How am I going to comb my hair, wear my clothes, walk down the street? It's a huge search for. Popular music is a place where a lot of people go to find their different pieces of their identity. And so I pulled all of this together into this guy named Bruce Springsteen, whoever that might be, It comes both out of a place of great joy and great pain. And which is why it's so filled with life, because that's life. Life is great joy, great pain. You try to blend them together in a way that makes life bearable to live, And so that thing that you've created comes out of that ground, and what makes the joy feel real is the fact that it's embedded in this soil of difficulty and struggle and pain that you've lived through and are trying to make sense out of as a repairman, as a musician.
These characters and these adventures that you wrote about that still crop up here and there, but for the most part, as you've continued to grow as an artist and a human, you've been able to let them rest to some degree. But they were very alive in the first phases of your journey. and I think a lot of times we always felt like, A, those characters were real, and B, they were trying to escape where they came from, a physical boundary as such.
Sure, yeah.
And yet I wonder whether or not maybe we got it wrong at times, and that escapism was that the pain is still there. Even though you're trying to repair it, the pain is still there, and those characters are kind of you. And in a way, you're trying to escape yourself to some degree and who you actually are as a person versus the construct of what you want to become.
That's right. Really, I thought, when I was young, I thought, I just want to get out of town, man. I'm stuck in Asbury. I'm stuck in Freehold. I'm 20 years old. I'm 22. And, I just want to go someplace. And so all my early characters were really based on characters that I sort of knew in Asbury Park, all these different little street characters. And I used part of it was real and part of it was my imagination, and that's where Greetings from Asbury Park and The Wild and Innocent and the East Street Shuffle and some of Born to Run comes from. But what you find out later is hey, I live 10 minutes from Freehold right now. It wasn't so much the place you were trying to get away from. It was some aspect of you that you were unhappy with at the moment, and you were trying to sort through and process, And as time went by, I realized that I like where I live, I like where I was born, I like the people that are here. It's been a great life for me here, I've been pretty protected by the community that's here, so I kept a level head and it protected me from sort of the vicissitudes of fame and fortune. Which can confuse a lot of people. But you're right, it's initially, it's not so much you want to actually physically get away. It's that you need to process the things that are painful in your life and the parts of yourself that you want to escape. You got to sort through that stuff.
And if I could ask you, because I've done that too, and there's a moment that you get there where they call it a breakthrough. And that's really breaking it down to its core element so that you can always refer to it as and when you feel lost.
Right.
Bruce Springsteen, the superstar, the person who has influenced and inspired and given joy to millions and millions of people, the person who makes music. Why is Bruce Springsteen here?
I have no idea.
No breakthrough. No breakthrough. We got some more work to do, Bruce. We got more work to do.
I don't know the answer to that question. This is everybody. I think if you're talking about
why does he exist? Not why is he still here. Why does he exist?
Right.
Yes.
If you were searching for a purpose in your life, I was a guy that was born to pick up that guitar and put my band together and travel around the world and give people a good night of entertainment if I can, and maybe sometimes a little bit more.
That's a spiritual calling, Bruce, right? And it brings us to a song like "The Power of Prayer," which is And also the idea of faith and the fact that throughout your life, and I think of an album like The Rising really as a key moment there, because I feel like that was a real moment when you heeded the call, that you knew you had something to share and to say that would help to repair in your own words, and you heeded the call. And you give faith to so many people. I wonder where you get what you put your faith in, and where you're able to have a relationship with faith that's personal.
Yeah, well, you know, I grew up Catholic, and that was enough to turn me off from religion forever, you know. And I realized as I grew older that you can run away from your religion, but you can't really run away from your faith. That's something that is a very, it's a very different thing. And so I carried a lot of the language with me, of the biblical language, which I use and write with quite often. And my work is filled with it. You know, Promised Land, House of 1,000 Guitars, Power of Prayer on this record. You know, I found a meditative, constructive, fulfilling sort of faith through my work. The song Power of Prayer on the record really sort of explains how, hey, that was those little 3-minute records and 180-second character studies that came through pop music were like these little meditations and little prayers for me. And that's what I turned them into. And my faith came in and filled those songs and gave them a spiritual dimension, you know. It's an essential part of your life.
How does music play a role in your life when you're not making it and when you're not writing it? And does it always fill the rooms? And what do you listen to? What do you and Patty enjoy?
All right, let me think what I've listened to. Okay, I have a show I'm working on. I'm going to work on today where there's a song called American Muscle by a group called One America. I have Nas's Car 85 from his new record. I have Chuck Berry's No Particular Place to Go. I have a song by the Screaming Blue Messiahs, a group that was from 1983, one of the greatest bands of the 80s that people are not that familiar with. I have a song by the Tom Robinson Band called 2468 Motorway from the 70s. So I'm all over the place, you know. So right now I'm listening to all those things for the show that I'm going to do today. You
know, I feel like music this year has really shown up. It took a minute for artists to understand how to move in a different way because, you know, no longer family record tour. Like, wait a minute. And it was our job as fans to give artists the space to find their voice at a time when stillness and creativity aren't actually good for, don't necessarily get along all the time, right? Stillness is not always a good friend to the artist, is it, Bruce?
Well, most artists are not good at being still. You know, that if you were good at being still, you wouldn't be
running around the world at 1,000 miles an hour, yeah.
Even when you're in one physical place, your brain is always off on another adventure, you know? And so my mind is constantly in the wilderness, you know, searching for what's going to happen next. Where am I going? What journey am I on? And so if you're going to be an artist, you cannot expect a quiet mind. They just don't go together, you know. As you get older, hopefully you learn to reserve some room for that mind so that you're not constantly running and constantly working and constantly in place. That's an important skill to develop. But in general, artists are not creatures of a quiet mind, and that's just the way that it goes.
Yeah, and it's not a quiet time. I've always felt to some degree like we have wanted you to speak or to show up or to use your voice even more than you've been willing. And that we are trying to pull you into a conversation at times where you feel like you have a right, and you do, to decide how you want to show up. And that's really through the power of your music and your ability to heal through your music. But does it feel like a bit of a tug of war sometimes between the quiet, secret, subliminal hope that Bruce is going to put out a record that speaks to the times versus what is really going on inside you?
Well, I take into consideration that I'm in a conversation with an audience, and that because I have established this conversation 45 years ago, I have an obligation to hold up my end of it. So I try to do that, as best as I can, and fulfill what I feel is my continuing commitment to the ideas that we've put forth and the audience that we've nurtured. So I don't go quiet intentionally for any long periods of time, unless I don't have anything really to add to the conversation at that moment or anything to say. I'm interested in, as much as anybody else is, in well, what's going to happen next? I don't know. I got to wait and see. I wouldn't have expected that I'd had this group of songs. Guys were telling me that we cut the record almost a year ago next month. I didn't think, what I thought I'd have those songs and have the band in the studio at that time and things would have just worked. No. So, but I believe in holding up sort of my end of the conversation as best as I can.
But I think a lot of people would have thought that this would have been a time when you would have come out and there would have been a moment where there was a reckoning of sorts with the way the world sits. And I think for me personally, I think it's beautiful that you found a space to speak personally and honestly rather than speak for everybody else.
I don't come from concept first, and I don't believe the artist has to address the exact moment literally, when they put a piece of work out. This record sort of, it addresses it in its own way,
Can you give us an example about where you see that, where you hear that in the music that you made, where you feel like, in a way, whether you consciously or subconsciously, you steered into the moment?
To address yourself simply topically all the time. And I would say the closest I ever came to doing that would have been unintentionally, maybe Nebraska during the Reagan years, maybe a little Born in the USA, and The Rising would probably be as close as I've come to sort of taking on immediately and direct topical issues. In general, I don't do that, because very often I just can't write the songs that are good enough for the moment, and so you write what comes out of you, and that's the best that you have to offer at a given moment.
Are you more surprised than anybody else that people consider Bruce Springsteen to be this voice of the American narrative, this person who always finds a way to translate, the chaos and the calm, and yet to your point, it's never been a conscious or conceptual decision?
Well, I think if you look at the body of my work and we're trying to, if you wanted to find a body of work that expressed what it was like to be an American, say from 1970 to now, in the post-industrial period of the United States, yeah, I'd be a place you could go and get some information on that. And so in that sense, I always try to speak to my times in the way that I best could. And so that may be where that side of my identity comes from.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation, and this album is a great conversation between yourself and all of us. And so if we could end by me asking you this, can you recall one of the greatest conversations that you've ever had with somebody that really has stayed with you? And not even in the specifics of what they said, but just a conversation that you remember, because we have them all the time.
Sure.
But it saddens me that we don't recall enough of them because they subliminally make up the learnings of our life. And if you could recall one really impactful conversation.
Well, I would say that I'm involved in the conversation that I've had with John Landau, my friend and longtime manager and record producer. I've had some of the most essential conversations of my life with John, with my close friend. And these are conversations that I would call life-shaping conversations, where they were very, at times when I was really in a quest for and stuck for where I was going, and John was a great resource and friend, and I had just some critical conversations. It's good. I wish that everyone has one friend that they can have that conversation with, which is the conversation of your life. You know, that's something I wish on everybody. And then the conversation with my fans. You know, that's an essential part of who I am. But I had some very, very, very intense and continue to have very meaningful conversations with my good friend John.
Well, this has been a great one for me, and hopefully for everyone who's watched it and listened to it. Thanks, Bruce.
You were great, man. I really appreciate it. You were really terrific. Thank you.
So were you, man. I love talking with you. It was incredible. I'll never forget it.
God bless all. Take care.